Hello, hello, and welcome to the Elevated Frequency podcast brought to you by the Green Door Life. And my name is Shannon Morse. I'm sitting here with my co-founder, Lisa Kirby. And today we are very excited to have our very first guest on our podcast, who is Daniel Pitt, psychic medium, who I've had the joy and the immense pleasure of working with on and off for the past year and a half or so. And I'm very excited and grateful that you're our first host. So, hi, Daniel.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here, very grateful. Thank you.
And when I said host, I actually meant guest, but you're kind of a host too. You're usually hosting me. So, that's partly what happens. So, as we go in through this podcast today, and of course, for those of you who listen to us regularly, you might be thinking, why are we doing this podcast of psychic mediumship when we as a company are generally about our nutrition and our movement and all of these different areas of self-care? And what we're going to kind of talk about today is how the ability that we have to develop our intuition and our psychic awareness is just another level of awareness that is equal to, if not even sometimes more important than, our awareness and our intuition as it relates to our physical body. So we're really looking at, diving in with you, Daniel, as a professional in this area. And since Lisa hasn't worked privately with Daniel yet, we thought it would be a fun thing for Lisa to start out with questions for Daniel and then, have this authentic conversation and then go from there. So Lisa, would you like to take it away?
I would. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here again. This is very exciting. So I think when I hear the word psychic, and from my lens and my perspective, I've personally automatically written myself off of that's not something I have, right? And I've traditionally have identified with a very logical, rational, kind of analytic brain. Wasn't really into art, or I was into dance, more connected to the body. But in my experience, even in feeling like I had a very spiritual upbringing, I always kind of just turned away from the term psychic, oh, that's so advanced. That's not me. I don't have those abilities. So for anyone kind of out there, if you could share a little bit more about what that means to you, and just kind of the varying levels of psychic abilities that you see in different kinds of people, and if that's something that can actually be developed in anyone.
That's a really lovely question. And what I've noticed on my journey is very much, it's not uncommon. A lot of people discount their awareness because that's what it is. And I think because of the media and how being psychic is portrayed, I think people see it as traditionally fortune telling, seeing the future, and more out there rather than more tangible, more as a useful part of ourselves. So for me, being intuitive is it's like a spectrum, like all things. So we started being intuitive, and we all have these hunches and senses. We meet people, we feel immediately connected or not, or we just feel like I need to phone someone, and you've been on that. They talk about being on their mind. There's synchronicity in that. So for me, there is this low level kind of hum of the soul, because it all comes from the soul. And that's where everyone is united, because I believe that everyone has this soul, and it's, I suppose, its own language forms for me in intuition. So in my own life and what I teach others, it's about how to really listen, to be aware of this inner voice, this inner compass, and where predominantly it's been used to teach others, to read for others, to heal others, to know stuff about others. There hasn't been a great deal in how we can use it to navigate our own journey. So that's very much what where I am in my own journey, and very much what I teach is where I am. But everyone has this awareness, but for some it's louder and some it's quieter, but it's a muscle. So I believe, we can develop this. Now, you mentioned there that you don't feel that's part of your makeup, but you spoke about being a dancer and loving dancing. And for me, dancing is ever so creative. And I believe that this light that you are, this soul that we all hold, part of its nature is a desire to express, to communicate with the world and the universe at large. So anything that is expressive, dancing, singing, cooking, sewing, anything is potentially coming from that well of wisdom and energy.
I love that. That's amazing. Love. And I really appreciate your perspective of, because it resonates 100% with me, of when we think of psychic, we think of fortune telling for other people.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why I've always kind of brushed it off like, oh, that's a skill I don't have. Because I've always felt very hyper aware of myself and my emotions, and I've been journaling every day just about since I was 7. And so I've always felt a deep connection with self. But I think with the term psychic and my minimal understanding of it in that sense was always, okay, this is something you do for other people, and I don't know how to do that at all.
Yeah, and it's so often way by many people, and I think it's just the use of language. If people say, "Well, are you intuitive?" and I think a lot of people recognise that intuition. They don't always see it as being psychic. And of course, it's, as I said, the spectrum, and it's about how we use that intuition to feel into knowing about work and love and money and home life and family and relationships, and of course our own well-being. Like just sitting in with the soul, and what do I need? And the soul always knows. It always knows what we need. It knows always what's good, what's nourishing. We just don't learn. We're not taught as children, or many are not everyone, but the majority, we're not taught or educated to seek, to really be with that power. And I think that part of the development is learning to dialogue with that something which is separate from our personality, something that's separate. It's tangible and intangible at the same time. And I think words are really, languages can be very useful, but also quite limiting. And I think it's how people are educated and guided to normalize it, and not, the psychic stuff is all spooky, it's all crazy, and it's like, actually it's not. It's just being aware of really your first sense, but it's something beyond smell and touch and hearing. It's our first sense. But because we grow up in a very busy world, we come away from ourselves, we come away from the soul, and and that shows up in every aspect of our life, in our relationships, our friendships, our relationship with our body, our health, the environment. So for me, it's got to be nourishing to really be aware of that soul consciousness.
Oh, Dan, it's so good. It's so good. At least can I drop in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's causing me to think about a lot of different things. So, Dan, I want to get into a couple of areas with you, but the one thing that comes to mind as you're talking about this is that what I learned from my classes with you at what's I know that they've gone through a couple names, but what's the college that you have taught at most frequently?
So I teach at College of Psychic Studies in London.
Yes.
That's where we met initially.
Yes.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay. So when I was there, what I started to realize in some of your classes is that what I thought was logically true was not what I was actually experiencing from the soul level, both about things about myself and things about others.
Will you say that again?
Yes. So what I thought was logically true about myself or others was not actually the information that I was getting from a soul level.
So it differed
Greatly.
Okay.
So what I would think about myself, for example, even, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to go this fringe yet. Ooh. Okay, fine. We're just going to go this fringe. Yeah. So with initially the COVID vaccine, because I got the COVID vaccine, it was the very first vaccine that I had ever gotten in my life. I was born at home. My placenta is buried in the backyard. It was that kind of upbringing.
I love your mom.
Yeah, I know. Hi, Mom. Thank you for making me a nourished little baby. I'm human. But so I was really kind of conflicted here. And because of the nature of my partner Jeff's work, he needed to start traveling. And some of that travel was going to be international. And so I had to make the decision of whether I was going to get vaccinated or not at that time. And I was stressing out about it. Like every day I would wake up and I'm just stress. And I'm not a huge stressor. Like I can usually like navigate myself pretty well, but it was perpetual. Anyways, so what ended up happening is I started to drop in, and I was working with you in your classes at this time, Dan. And so I started to drop in and just go, is it for my highest good to get vaccinated right now? And the answer was yes. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense because all my logic says it's the wrong idea, right? And then I said, is it because the stress is worse for me than the vaccine? The answer was yes. I was like, okay. So I was spending all of this time stressing from my logic, like, mammalian brain. And I wasn't actually dropping in. And not to say that anyone out there should make their decisions about their medical care through this practice, but that was what my experience was in this very extreme experience. So we're not prescribing, of course, here ever. But that was just an example of what I've noticed, and an example of the value of when you understand how to contract that muscle and what to listen for. So, Dan, my question for you next is, when did you start noticing, or when did this path start to open up for you to really move into this area of development?
I think it happened in two ways. First, unconsciously, as a lot of, if you read a lot of books of other mediums and psychics, they talk about as a child being aware, hearing voices, seeing things, and I wasn't aware so much of the spirit world as a medium. A lot of my work has been about communing with those who've moved past on. But as a child at school, I always knew a lot of stuff about everyone at school that really I had no business knowing. And it was just a bit of a joke, really, but it wasn't funny. But people used to like, oh, you're a witch, how do you know that? And I'd know quite unpleasant things, like children had gone through tough times at home, and I just know when they get off a bus, I'd go up and hug them. Are you okay? And I was like, how do you know that? And I don't know. I just knew it. And I don't know. I've always been into, as a child, like fantasy and typical sci-fi, Star Wars, And but at 16, my nan died, and my nan was my very best friend, and she passed away, and that was it. I was a very angry, obnoxious 16-year-old, and my mum took me to an evening demonstration of mediumship. And I went to look after my mum because I thought she was getting pulled into some kind of weird cult. And I was like, when you're dead, you're dead. Leave it alone. It's not okay. Anyway, 80 people in the hall. Second message from medium goes straight to me and says, I've got your nan here. And she gave all this detail. And it it was right, but I thought, oh, my mum's told her this. All the time thinking, my mum's told her this, so many facts. And then she said, oh, you're a natural medium. You've been aware of the spirit world all your life, but particularly when your nan died, you saw her, she spoke to you. And she went on to explain the setting. I grew up on a farm in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. And the day she died, I went out for a walk on a field and I had an experience. It was phenomenal. And I felt loved. I knew it was my nan, but I also thought, I'm going mad. And I'm making this happen and I'm colluding with myself because, of course, you don't want to believe they're gone, and that was my rational thinking at 16. Anyway, the medium in the hall company, you saw your nan the day she died. You were in a field on a farm. There was dew on the grass. It was in the morning. And by now I'm thinking, well, I've told nobody that. I hadn't told my mum or my dad because I thought it'd lock me up. And by now I'm bawling my eyes out, and my mum's bawling her eyes out. And she said, you'll be standing here in 3 years' time doing as I do because the other ones want you. And it literally changed my life because of what it gave me was this knowing that I hadn't lost my nan, that she was very much alive because of all the facts and everything she knew about me that only my nan would know. And it made me feel good. And the most powerful thing it really did, I reflect on this often, is, a lot of humanity fears death. And sometimes we're so busy fearing we're going to die, we forget to really live. And when you know that your memory, your personality, your soul, and that love you have doesn't really die, it just changes, it moves on, that it is accessible. It's a really empowering truth. And I became, from that point, obsessed. I thought, if I could do that for one person, that would be quite groovy. That would be really cool. So at 16, I read everything I could get my hands on. Back in the 90s, we didn't have the internet like that. It was all very going down the library and read old books. And, it wasn't a young person's game. A lot of the cliche of mediums being slightly older people and so a lot of the mediums I was connecting with, I joined a spiritualist church and the constant message was wait till you're older. But I was aware it was like someone had switched the lights on. And from then, after about 2 years, I joined what I call a development circle. And I sat with a very experienced medium. We learned to meditate. We learned to connect with those minds that guide us and give evidence, give messages. And over a very short space of time, I was taken around with another medium to go on what I call rostrum or platform to give messages to audiences and do private sittings. So by then I was 18, 19. I did my first proper sitting at 18, and my first demo, I'll never forget because I'd just been backpacking to Australia and came back, and the medium phoned in sick. So I said, oh, you'll learn, get up here and do it. So that's how it all began. That's a very, very compressed story, but that's from 19 was when I really started, I suppose, being professional, going out there. And I was very young at 19, when a lot of my peers were my age now, 46, 45 plus, much older. So, that's how it started, really. But it when I fully became aware of my own ability, it's only now in hindsight. It's like, oh, that's what happened when I was a child. That's what I knew. And, and just touching on something you were saying about when you asked Shannon and knowing, I think that's the difference between we know, oh, that's a nice person, and sometimes we know. There's a knowing and we know stuff and we know stuff. And it's learning to be with the knowing. And that's what intuition is. And when you look back in your life, you think, oh, I knew that, but I didn't acknowledge it. Does that make sense?
Yes. So much yes. And I want to also share for all of our listeners that the reason why we're doing the podcast with Daniel right now is because we're lucky enough for him to run a workshop that's coming up for 6 weeks. And he has a free workshop with us, kind of an intro next on the 21st of February.
That's
and if you
right.
guys are interested in that, I was like, let me remember the date real quick. Then you can go to the website, go to our classes page. If you're watching this live, you should be able to find our website from there, or else we will drop it into the recording information as well. But that's really one of the reasons that we're having this specific conversation today. And then I also feel like I'm cheating because whenever we've been in your class, I haven't known any of this stuff about you. And at least sometimes the practice is to feel into what Daniel's journey has been.
Oh, interesting.
And so I'm kind of like going like, oh, that one I totally, and then I'm also like, I totally missed. No, I did not get that one, or whatever it might be. You know what I mean?
But to be fair, you've always got the most amazing stuff for me. So, and it's been very focused. So again, you've always done really well. You're one of my favorite students. So, you don't need to worry.
Yeah, don't dim your light, Shannon. We all know your skills.
You're brilliant.
Dan and I have had some really, really cool moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, am I supposed to be saying this out loud? Like, wait a second. He's like, just keep talking. I'm like, okay, we'll just keep saying it. Okay, so we keep on track. Lisa, is there anything that you wanted to kind of share in retrospect to what Dan shared about his journey?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just getting chills because I'm picturing you, so many things, but I'm picturing you as a teenager and awakening at that time and embracing a gift like that. I mean, it probably felt dually illuminating and almost like a relief of like, oh, this is why, and explained a lot of things, but also probably, maybe terrifying and shocking at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But I love your description of death and it just being not a true, ending of sorts, and something. I have 2 sons, 10 and 6. And my youngest has probably asked me more about death than anything else. He is extremely intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I have definitely thought like he was probably psychic. When he was really little, he would talk about people and things, and we're like, there's nothing there. And we're just like, what is going on in what are you seeing? What are you picking up on? What I've explained to him about death is there is no, maybe your physical body looks different, but your soul, it just transitions. So now he says, grandpa transitioned or great grandpa transitioned. Right. And it helps him understand that there's no ending, because he's just said the other day, he's like, Mom, I hope you don't die until you're 1,000 years old. And it's like, I know what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
And so we talk about that a lot of like, maybe great grandpa's right here and his energy's like right there sitting on the couch watching you. And so that makes him light up and smile. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing to discuss with children and to make it not this thing that you fear your whole life.
Mm-hmm. And definitely, I think because death is the biggest taboo. It's the thing we do, and again, it's left to families because schools don't. I think I was very fortunate as parents who, I've had a lot of death in my life from a very young age, and it's always stays with me because I remember I lost someone when I was 8 who I loved greatly, and that message of look up, that bright star, that son called Tom. And it's always, it gave me something to focus on. But I think it's not bypassing or undervaluing the physical loss. It's for human. We love to touch, we love to cuddle, and there's no substitute for that. Even all what we know. But it's not forever. It's not goodbye forever. It's just see you later. And that's very much about where part of my work is educating people to because we have a need as human beings to think that the whole universe is a reflection of planet Earth when it just can't be. We are a dot. But if we can be more inquisitive about the substance of the soul and what consciousness is, and realize that how the other world commune to us won't be as a mirror image of us. They move our thoughts, they move our mind. And that's what inspiration is. We get inspired to turn the radio and, oh, it's my nan's favourite song, it's my wife's favourite song, and I think it is a power that moves us. And in that we can go, oh, we're here. And it can give great comfort. And I think because of when we're out of the body and there's such a vastness of time and space in the universe, we don't always question that it's so subtle. And so we're always looking for something, and I've done it. If you're there, turn the lights on and off. We're so holding this power to ransom. And because we're looking for that, we're not being aware of a subtle sense of, oh, I'm not alone. I feel warm. I feel cold. And we can have 20 people we love in the spirit, but our mind goes to one person because it's that one person at that moment phoning home. Because people we love phone home. And that's what it's all about. It's love. And this idea of wanting to encourage and support and inspire people to, I know you miss me. You've got to be here, but, I'm only a thought away. And I think the more we allow it to be normal and natural and available, I think that's the problem with a lot of people is whatever we believe, we create. And the universe doesn't question whether that's a good belief or a bad belief. So beliefs can be opening and they can be closing and limiting. So part of the work is to be curious about what we believe and see, does it support, does it nourish, does it elevate? Because the wonderful thing about the human condition is we literally can change our mind. And that's for work. And I think that's across the board, not just being psychic or being, about how we approach health and how we, have good relationships and what we believe about money and everything. But I think what this journey does is when there is something else, that's what for me ignited my own spiritual journey, because I think for me there's a difference between the mediumistic and the psychic and the spiritual journey, which is, well, if they're not dead, where are they? And then that goes on to another question.
There's so much good stuff in here, Dan. This is like a conversation that could extend into literal hours with you. So this might be part one of part two.
I'm aware I can talk a lot, so I need to be a bit more punchy in my answers. Sorry.
No, it's beautiful and great. And I just want to ask for you, Dan, if you need to cut it short at the moment, or can we continue for a little longer?
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine.
Beautiful. So one thing that was coming to mind with that also, and I think this is beautiful because we have these three really unique perspectives. We have you as Dan, the psychic medium, who has been living with this as a natural, normal day-to-day state for so long. We have Lisa, who definitely, in my experience, is intuitive, is deeply spiritual, but may not necessarily have opened that doorway in her house of belief that that's who she is or what she's capable of yet. And me that has been doing this in different capacities and knowing that it's part of me, just needing to know that I need to flex that muscle more frequently. So what I noticed in your classes, Dan, and this is one thing why we're bringing you as a guest host into the workshops, is because just as with anything else, in our group call today with all of our members, Dan, we just got off of an 1.5-hour group call with about 20 or 30 of our members, and everyone has a different body. They have a different lifestyle. They have a different perspective of what works for them, different ways of moving their body, different rates of recovery. And what I thought was so fascinating in your classes is as we develop and get to see how we perceive from that soul state, we get to experience how it's so vastly different for everyone. And watching how, whether it's from a psychic perspective of how people, I mean, I've had readings where people literally have like a trailer of a movie that unfolds for them. And then they just show, like, they just talk about the trailer of the movie. I've noticed that what has come more and more into fruition and clarity for me is I get dropped right into someone's body and I look around to see what they have in their field. I've also seen that some people get like full kaleidoscopes of color, and then they're talking about the pieces of the kaleidoscope. And it's so cool because everyone has their unique way of just receiving and understanding what it means to them and then trying to deliver it out. But especially what you were speaking to as it relates to mediumship and feeling the energy of those who have passed on. I've seen people receive those calls in different ways. So some, it's like they literally close their eyes. They can see someone running around the room, almost doing laps. Another one was as if they were sharing the same body for a moment and like tears were coming out, but it wasn't really their tears. It was the tears of the person who had passed. Just noticing that we all have, it may not look the same for everyone, and you can speak more into that than I can, but I thought that was just really fascinating.
And I think, it is fascinating as a shooter now, and it's been really useful for me. My journey as a teacher has changed, and I get more informed by my students. And of course, with the pandemic, it went from in person to online. So the world literally opened up to me in my classroom. But you're right, and I think that's where, for me, it's really about, and this is where the spiritual links in, how we need to, I believe, we need to celebrate everyone is perfectly individual. And because of the nature of being intuitive and psychic and mediumistic, it's the individual's awareness is a reflection of himself. So it can't be, though as a tutor I can create a class and exercises, what I know is in 14 different students, they all show up and respond to it differently because they're all wonderfully different. And I think it's really important we celebrate that diversity rather than it must be like this. And I see both in my work. Is a lot of people, look to particularly characters and figures. I want to be like that. And I would assume it's like that with every kind of trade and profession and athletes and fashion and singers. And I think rather than this is how my awareness works. And, speaking myself, and I'm doing this for like 30 years, I've gone through that. Oh, I want to be like this. I want to be like that. But actually, no, that's my soul. This power, this love is unique, and I've just got to be me because, and that's what I want to encourage all my students to do. Just however their awareness is moved, whether they see it or hear it or know it or feel it, but also guiding and particularly as you were speaking there, Shannon, it's like you were saying you drop into the body, but you're very body conscious, your whole work. So again, it's a reflection of who it's a reflection of your awareness and perception. Whereas if someone, for example, is a musician, a lot of they might get stuff through songs or music or and things like that. And a florist might work with the symbols of flowers, and I think it's about seeing, because what happens is this power we work with as mediums and psychics and intuitive, it responds to that which is there. We can't escape it. And I think that's what I've noticed is when the student is encouraged to work with what's there, as opposed to worry about what's not there, it works better. But I think, yeah, so I think that's really important, is just to celebrate it. And the only thing that matters is when we're working for other people, does it make sense? Is it feasible? Is it intelligent? Is it useful? Is it nourishing? Is it elevating? Because for me, they are the essentials. It should always be nourishing, healing, and elevating, and intelligent. And recognizing we are all complex beings. And, we talk about knowing. And of course, we can't escape ourselves. We can't escape the part where the ego and the intellect and the body, and they will all have needs and demands. And sometimes, and part of the work is how we soothe those parts so that that soul that voice can be louder and clearer. So part of the work is how do we soothe our personality and our if our body's in pain and discomfort, how do we go beyond that? And that's separate work from psychic work, but it leads to the whole. It should be a greater awareness of the whole to live a better life. That's what I feel. Yeah.
It's so beautiful, Dan. Whenever you're talking, I feel like it's a dissertation, really, which is wonderful. I'm going to keep us kind of moving along into our next. So, Dan, we kind of talked about part of your identity as well, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk about that, but also making sure that we touch on, what people can anticipate in receiving from like the workshop that's coming up. So I'll let you start with wherever you'd like to begin.
Oh, well, I was thinking a lot. Obviously, this is my first ever podcast, so it's all a new experience. So, listeners, if I'm talking a lot, that's me. I talk a lot. I talk a lot in class, and hopefully for some of you, it will be of use. But how I teach is very much where I am in life. So for me, for me, mediumship changed my life. The message from my nan changed my life, and it changed my life in a way that gave me a way to be seen in the world, which as a younger self I wasn't seen. And what it led me to was there is something more. There's something more in Daniel. There's something more when just this sphere, this planet Earth. And it led me to, a higher power. Some call it God. I just call it love. It's just a power that allows everything is to be. So for me, it was about, in my journey, mediumship, and I hope occasionally that the messages I've done, the work I've done, the teaching I've done has maybe changed a few people's lives for the better. That was always what got me on this journey. That's why I developed. But what I know now at 40, 45, 46 is actually this awareness, as in whatever you learn, is it has to change your life. And that's that's really the core of my teaching, because it's, I've gone from a stage where I just want to give messages and be noticed and like, oh, isn't that exciting? But for me, that's not the end of it. It's about helping you, the student, find your soul, find the guide within, the wisdom within the answer. Because for me, it's a form of activism, changing one person at a time to hopefully find this great power, this love, because that's what we need in this world more than anything. More now than ever, we need love. But we need to really be curious about what is love. And for me, it's curious, it's compassionate, it's supportive, it's open, it's non-judgmental. But for me to be really in that power, I have to learn to offer that to myself, which, and I know I'm not alone, it's been the hardest thing. And last year, just take a moment. So last year I got diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Not a surprise to everyone else, but it's changed my relationship with my body, and it's made me see how I've been socially and how I interact with people. And as a younger self, I was a victim of a lot of bullying as a result. And as an adult self, you know, that bullying has been, I've become my own bully, which is, and when you're bullying, you're mean and you're cruel to yourself and judging, there's not a lot of love there. So as someone trying to be to advocate and talk about love and being good and being kind, like, if I can't do that to Daniel, how on earth can I do it for anyone else? And I think that's what I see with all the work I do with my clients. I see is there's a real, we shortchange ourselves ever so easily with just the simple things. And we've been taught as a society that's okay. And it's just not what I believe. And for me, being aware of the spirit world, being aware of this soul, being aware of this aura, you know, it's being aware of a great power, which is love. And it's like actually not looking out there for it, but being it, embracing it, letting it hold you from inside the temple of your soul. You know, we talk about the body, your body is the temple. Inside is this magnificent, magical power, but we spend our lives looking out there to God, to church, and you know that's great. Faith is good. It gives us meaning and gets us through the tough days. But a lot of us, we crave for that connection that says we're not alone. And I think the reason we don't often find that connection is we're too busy looking out there rather than being that connection, being that love. So for me now in 2023, in terms of my teaching and what I want to do with the workshop, my class, which I'm really excited about, is to create some experiences firstly for you to be in touch with the soul, be in touch with your power and start a relationship. And of course, on one hand, that relationship has been there literally forever. But it's about how do we reconnect? How do we become awake? How do we become conscious, fully conscious, and find a way of being with our soul and our power and our light, and in a way that doesn't bypass us living here and now. It's not about spiritual bypassing. It's about actually trust that if we listen and slow down, that everything we need, all the wisdom is available within. We just need to remember how do we be with it? And it's, of course, we're all going to be with it in totally unique in different ways because we're all perfectly, wonderfully, totally unique. And so that's what I'm going to try and create in the class and give you ways of navigating and checking in terms of really how can you be fully healthy? How can you, what is the body needing? You know, and because I think when we check, you know, we talk about cravings, you know, sort of we need, but when we go on a more subtle energy, like what am I craving? But also maybe because why is that? Yeah. Why do I need to move? Why do I need to dance? Oh, I'm too busy to dance. Or I just need to sleep for a day. Or I mustn't sleep. I've got work. And it's like, how can we trust Right, any relationship, you have to have trust. And I think that's what we do in class, is we learn to trust. That's what you've done with me, Shannon. You've learned to trust that knowing. So that's what I endeavour to cultivate in my teaching.
I love. It's so beautiful. Yeah. It's like anytime we focus on that connection with self, it just spills over outwardly. And I think everybody listening is gonna 100% resonate with that feeling of, why is it so hard to have that with ourselves? It's so easy to love, for most people, to love others and love outwardly, but to project that love and that light inward, it's not, you're spot on. It's not necessarily what we're taught as a society.
No. And it's certainly something it's not something I've been taught. It's something again, very much for the last few months with my CP, and I'm learning that, and just I do a lot of readings, a lot of sittings, a lot of demos, but it's not often I remember to I don't need that, and it is something really the other world said to me just literally a month ago. It was like, the best way to honor God or this power is be God to yourself. So whatever spiritual qualities, friendship, compassion, kindness, patience, and it's like, I'm not good at that here, and it's like be God to yourself, and in that you become the altar, you become the church. You might notice that, like, what's her secret? What's his secret? So it becomes a living example. But you're not doing it for anyone else, just yourself. But it must change you. It has to, because it hopefully will free you from. I think we as a humanity have got into this trap that we believe we're here to suffer. The first message the second message I ever had from a medium was, you're here to suffer, and that's really good. And with every atom of my being, I repelled it. It's like, no, that can't be true. We can't be born into this world just to be miserable. That's what's, but I think that belief is very prevalent. And I think it's about actually how do we counteract that story that we learn on we're told in many ways. So yeah, that's what I'm about.
Dan, it's so good. I also want to ask you, did you just say be good to yourself or be God to yourself?
Be God to yourself, or goddess, depending on your outlook in life.
Lisa, did you have the same question?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was like, was that a Freudian slip? Because otherwise that is amazing. And I thought that was really a beautiful way, just a perspective shift for all of us just to move, well, what would that look like, if we are God to ourselves? And how would we choose that? And what would that be on a daily basis? And again, like, we could speak about these things for hours with you. And I always love listening to everything that you have to say in the classes and right now. And it really feels like you have such a gift. And I can hear that the experience with the diagnosis throughout this year has been a total radical shift. And I'm wondering if it's changed your life in any way outside of just identity.
It's an ongoing journey. I think I've gone through lots of, I think, grief, and identity that was so it's, that whole spectrum. But I think where I'm at now is it's taught me kindness, but it's also made me realize, actually, I've never been labeled with a disability. And in comparison, it's not huge, or it's not severe, but it's for subtle things, and I think what it's given me is a voice to advocate for myself, but it's also brought my awareness and attention to where there is a lot of where ableism is very, there's a lot of poverty around ableism in this world, and how again in that there is an absence of love, there is an absence of equality and equity. So it's kind of put more fire in my belly to be a bit more, speaking up and noticing that actually that's not okay. It's just, and I find myself getting quite upset when, things to do with accessibility and things like that. And it's like, actually, you just assume it's okay, when there's steps and there's no ramps, and you think, well, people forget that people can become disabled at any time, and heaven forbid, but as I get older, my body is changing, and I suppose that's the hardest thing I've noticed. And in that, it's always both. It's not a great thing, but it has been a gift because it's made me become more health conscious. Looking at my diet, looking at my exercise, looking at my posture. So maybe I'd have been really lazy around that. I'm like, well, actually, there's a thing with cerebral palsy called post-impairment syndrome. So everything I do is times 5 more output of energy to somebody who hasn't. So 1 flight of stairs is 5 flights of stairs. Any exertion is times 5. But it also means that part of how I move in the world is I'm very heavy-footed. I get through shoes a lot. But that in turn impacts on my bones, and so I'm learning. It was actually, that's because of that. So it's this, I'm having to adapt my lifestyle, and not all of that is bad. It's just a bit like, I'm at 45. I don't feel like I'm an old man, but I feel like I'm an old man. So as it's changed, it's ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing more into that, because I know that was something that we wanted to talk about a little bit more deeply.
And just finally on that, what it's really, really, really honed into me is the need for inclusion, the need, and I think not everyone's disability is visible, and it's not always physical, it's not always sensory. There's a lot of neurodiversity in the world, and I think as a teacher, it's made me much more alert in class and be more mindful to people's needs. And I, having been a student myself the last 18 months, because I've been training in psychotherapy, it's made me realize when there's an absence of that awareness, that in the absence of inclusion is not okay. It's just not okay. But again, on a spiritual level, that's a problem in the world. There's not this sense of inclusion. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, all of this, should change me, should hopefully change those I may change those I encounter, but ultimately change the world. That's really what it's about, becoming a collective consciousness, conscious as well as the unconscious collective.
100%. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start to round us out and give us a summary here, because it's been so much amazing, incredible things in all areas. So in summary, just because we have this next workshop that's coming up, you're our first guest on our podcast, which I feel very fortunate that you are our first one, and thank you.
I feel very privileged. Thank you.
And for those that are listening, and we might have to write this again in the description. In my experience, and the reason why Lisa and I decided to bring this kind of workshop into the community is because so far we really see in our general health demographic is that things are very linear and segregated. Just like you're talking about with inclusion, in terms of including all different learning styles and disabilities and all of these things, we're also looking at inclusion of like, what is the full spectrum of health? Because if we just look at the physical body and we just forget about the spiritual body or the mental body, nothing works together. So as Lisa and I have been going through our own discovery, and we have our unique journeys through our own experience with our physical health, and then how that impacts our mental health, and then especially how it then moves into the spiritual health, or I would say soul or spirit health, right? Then it's really, this is kind of the Holy Trinity that they talk about: mind, body, and spirit. So we are very adept at the physical, the movement and nutrition, but we also understand the immense value and requirement to have the mental and the spirit bodies also very well in alignment and cared for as well. And generally, the things will come up inside of our journeys with clients where they might be out of balance with their mental or spirit health. And so what's really cool about this, Dan, is that we're able to, have someone like you who's able to more well round out what we're looking to provide for our members and clients with a broader spectrum of the whole health perspective. And I am very excited for this because I don't see it being done, but I understand the value. Yes. Dan, is there something
I'm
else?
excited for the opportunity to, because it's a slightly new, it's a new approach for me as a tutor, but I'm excited about it. And it's just come up many years ago. Someone told me I would an amazing medium we lost last year, but she said you'll teach healthy mediumship, and I never understood until now what she meant.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I
It
love
just
that.
popped into my mind as you were speaking. Oh my God, it's about healthy, like using this awareness to be healthy.
Oh,
And, yeah,
Well, there you
so-
go.
full circle, Dan. Full circle. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. For those of you who do not know, Daniel Pitt, psychic medium, you will be able to find his details in our live stream as we edit it momentarily. So it won't be live just yet. For those of you who are just following us for the first time, we are the Green Door Life. You'll also be able to find the class for Daniel Pitt at www.thegreendoorlife.com/classes. And this starts again on February 21st is the free workshop. And then we have a 6-week series that will follow up the following week. So I believe it's the 28th. And I believe that is it for now. So thank you to everyone who's watching today and who is watching in the future. Thank you so much, Dan, for
Thank you
joining
so
us.
much for having me. Thank you.
And
Thank
Lisa,
you.
of course, this was awesome.
It was lovely. And I think we all agree we could talk for hours.
It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, guys, until next time, have a fabulous day and we will see you soon.